Question Evolution Day, we're going to ask a bunch of questions for evolutionists, as well as answer a bunch of questions for creationists. This is Genesis Week. And welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the Origins controversy, made possible by you, the supporters of CORE Ottawa, Citizens for Origins Research and Education. Excellence in pirate broadcasting, we continue to bring you the information the anti-creationists don't want you to see or hear, and giving glory to our Creator while doing it. Remember, if you get lost in cyberspace, you can just punch in wazulu.com, that's me, or genesisweek.com, that's the show. And you can find us, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to get extras like Crevo rants and full interviews with our guests. I'm your host, Ian Chuby. The week this show airs is an eventful one. Now, by the time you watch this, the much-anticipated Bill Nye Ken Ham debate will have just ended. And in just a few days is the annual Question Evolution Day on Darwin's birthday, February 12th. Now, with all of the lead up to the Question Evolution Day, some skeptics were ramping up with their own campaign to ask questions of creationists. And I was handed a list of 10 questions creationists allegedly cannot answer. Now, as a result, this entire show is devoted to answering questions and giving some questions in return. So let's get down to business. Woohoo! Mail for me! Now, I want to be respectful of you viewers who are honest skeptics and honest seekers of the truth. I appreciate that you would ask questions and voice your challenges to creationary ideologies, and I want to respectfully answer those questions. On the other hand, I hope you'll be patient, because I do not believe the list of questions I was given represents the average, honest, truth-seeking skeptic. Now, the questions I was given clearly came from anti-creationists who hadn't thought the questions through. Furthermore, this list of questions was apparently compiled sometime in 1996, but I was given this list seeking a response. So, bearing all that in mind, here goes. The list was compiled by Frank Steiger, who sadly passed away in 2010, and I'm certain is now a creationist. The web essay is entitled 10 Questions Creationists Can't Honestly Answer. Oh, I'll be giving honest answers all right, though even in the title the accusations of liar are already flying, showing the quality of questions and comments you are about to receive. Now, question number one just happens to be one of my most favorite subjects, and it's interesting, this is his number one question, because this is actually where the creation-evolution debate got its start. The Genesis flood, where did all the water come from? Where did it all go? To answer this question, one simply has to look at the flood account in Genesis chapter 7. Just remember, 7:11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. So it would appear the floodwaters came from underground. Now, this is fascinating in that there have been two super deep exploratory boreholes drilled into the Earth's crust. One of them in Russia and one in Germany. Both of them encountered circulating salty water at extreme depths. Now, one must remember that even solid rock, when put under enough pressure, will deform like Play-Doh, and even granite deforms under the weight of the overlying rock at around 8,000 meters deep, or about 5 miles. The circulating salty water was found at least to the 11,500 meter mark, well beyond the pressures required to deform granite. And so any cracks leading to the surface would be squeezed closed just by the sheer weight of the rock lying on top. So if there was no possible cracks to the surface, how did that water get down there? And so we see large quantities of water deep underground. Isn't it interesting the Bible seems to imply the water came from underground? These appear to be remnants of the great deep. Now, where did the water go? Well, good grief. Have you taken a trip to the ocean? The water is still there. You can go and study it. Question number 2 also happened to be one of my favorite questions. How could Genesis flood form the Grand Canyon? Oh, you have got to be joking. This question coming from a guy who believes that the puny little Colorado River cut Grand Canyon, but is skeptical that a flood of global proportions could carve Grand Canyon. I'm sorry, this is willing ignorance. The Grand Canyon cuts through the Colorado Uplift, a giant dome uplift. And exactly as its name describes, it is a dome-shaped mountain through which the canyon cuts right through the middle. The Grand Canyon is what we call a water gap. If it's a dome, then obviously the water could have gone around the dome. Instead, it cut right through the middle of the dome. So, by Mr. Steiger's suggestion, the puny little Colorado River somehow went uphill for some 3,000 feet for millions and millions of years to slowly carve out Grand Canyon. But yet somehow a wall of water that was higher than the whole mountain could not carve Grand Canyon? This is utter foolishness to suggest. The fact of the matter is we find water gaps like this by the hundreds all around the world. Another classic example is the Buffalo Bill Dam Reservoir in Wyoming. The dam was built within the Shoshone Canyon between 1905 and 1910. The canyon cuts right through a mountain. But if you look to the right, you'll notice that they had to build a dam beside the mountain to keep the water from going around the mountain. So tell me, how on earth did the river climb uphill for 2,000 feet to carve a canyon through the middle of a mountain when it could have gone around the mountain a mere 10,000 feet to the south? It is physically impossible. Yet, if you start with a worldwide flood where all the mountains are underwater, and in fact being formed coming up through the water, as the water drains off the continents while the mountains are being built up, well, it's completely feasible. You'll please understand why I struggle to be respectful to such people as Steiger for making such utterly ludicrous comments and questions. We find water gaps like this by the hundreds all over the world. Cleared evidence of a worldwide flood. Now, question number 3 isn't actually a question, but a series of blanket statements that are patently false. How do you explain the universally consistent radioactive dating results obtained with different radioactive elements and the consistent correlation with objects of known age? Well, first, let's break down the assertions. Quote, consistent with objects of known age, end quote. Question, how do we know the age of those rocks? Oh, I'll tell you how. Evolutionarily assigned ages, that's how. So when the radio dating methods were calibrated, they were calibrated using the known ages of the rocks, which were based on evolutionary theory. It's circular reasoning. Quote, universally consistent radioactive dating results, end quote. Seriously? As we've briefly mentioned here on this show repeatedly, and has been shown in both secular and creationary scientific literature, the radio dates are anything but universally consistent. The Euan-Carrot lava flows alone had a spread of dating results between 10,000 years and 2.6 billion years old on rocks which contained Indian artifacts. So we know by archaeology that the rocks are in fact only 1,000 years old. Now I can only explain claims of, quote, universally consistent as glaring ignorance. Now let us also take a look at another form of radio dating which can be compared with those rock dating methods, carbon-14 dating. Now as a quick comparison, carbon-14 tests have been conducted on wood and coal fragments from dinosaur-bearing rocks, as well as the dinosaur bones themselves. The age of those dinosaurs and dinosaur beds, confirmed many times, just like Steiger says, by radiometric dating methods as being around 100 million years old. Yet the carbon-14 ages consistently date the wooden dinosaur bones as between 5,000 and 50,000 years old. So which age is the correct age? 5,000 years old? 50,000 years old? Or 100 million years old? So just how is the age of the rocks and dinosaurs known? Now, one thing can be said for certain. There will be no carbon-14 found in any sample over 100,000 years old. Therefore, because we find loads of carbon-14, we know for a fact that the dinosaurs are less than 100,000 years old. There is no billions of years in the rock record. Steiger then goes on to the next question, which I'll answer by tying into his last question. What scientifically factual information can you supply to support your contention that the universe is only a few thousand years old? Now, Steiger will be forgiven for being unaware of the radioisotopes and the Age of the Earth project, seeing as how he did not have a time-traveling machine. The RATE project was an 8-year collaborative creationary research project sponsored by the Institute for Creation Research, Answers in Genesis, and Creation Research Society, which, by the way, has been in existence since the 60s and has had a peer-reviewed publication since then, with decades of documenting the problems with radiometric dating. So the team proposed an experiment. They took tiny crystals called zircons from the granite crust of the Earth. Now, this granite is supposed to be 2 billion years old by evolutionary dates. Now, uranium inside the zircons breaks down radioactively into lead through a series of steps. For every uranium atom that breaks down into lead, it gives off 8 helium atoms. Now, helium, that's the gas you get inside your birthday balloons. And so if you can picture it, it's like a little helium generator inside the crystal. Now, the thing is, the helium atom is so small that it leaks right through the rock. In fact, this is also why your birthday balloon shrivels up. The helium atom is so small it leaks out of the plastic. The zircon crystals, however, have a lot of helium in them. So the RATE team didn't just come up with a way to date the Earth, and indirectly the universe, they actually made predictions, which are the most powerful proof of a scientific theory. They predicted the rate at which the helium would leak out of the crystal if the Earth was only 6,000 years old, a very fast leakage rate. They also predicted the rate at which helium would leak if the rocks were actually 2 billion years old. It would be an extremely slow rate. Now, the young Earth rate is 100,000 times faster than the old Earth rate. When they actually measured the actual leakage rate, it was bang on the 6,000 year prediction. This meant two things. One, the rock was not 2 billion years old, it was 6,000 years old. Two, because there was helium from 2 billion years worth of radioactivity in the rock, then 2 billion years of radioactivity actually happened in only 6,000 years. Therefore, the radioactivity of the past was incredibly fast. They not only showed the Earth was a measly 6,000 years old, they also showed that all of those billions of year ages given by radiometric dates, in fact, only represented a few thousand years, including the billions of year ages given to things like meteorites from deep space. The Earth is young, and that's only one of dozens of pieces of evidence. Question number 4. How do you explain the astronomical evidence that the universe is billions of years old without resorting to the preposterous assumption that the speed of light was millions of times faster in the past than it is now? Now, it's interesting that Steiger did not acknowledge that he too had the same problem with the limitations of the speed of light. We have an even distribution of energy throughout the universe. Yet even in his billions of years, he does not have enough time for all the energy to evenly disperse throughout the universe without exceeding the speed of light. Now, we dealt with this very question only a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Russell Humphreys, who explained how gravity variations cause time to change. In the farthest reaches of the universe, where there is very little gravitational energy, time moves really, really, really fast. Whereas here on Earth, we are near the center or in the center of a large gravitational well. Time moves very slowly, relative to the outer perimeter of the universe. Now, the thing is, Humphreys published this theory years before Steiger created this webpage. Stick around. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Not again!
To the horror of both fans and enemies, Ian Juby is back with more ranting goodness.
Okay, Jacques. You first.
Just when you thought his meds had kicked in, Ian goes off on a tangent about what killed the dinosaurs, the origin of life, defining evolution, and yes, even sex. It wasn't enough for an R rating, but nowadays, what is? Volume 4 of his ever-popular and ever-hated Kurivo Rants has 8 new short, fast, funny, and hard-hitting episodes. You can get your copy on the soon-to-be-extinct DVD for $15 plus shipping and handling, or purchase the instant digital download of all 8 tracks for just $8. Or you can buy all 4 volumes of his world-infamous rants for the price of 3. Order your copies today and have a party with, like, popcorn and stuff. Visit Ian's bookstore today.
Woohoo! Mail for me?
Before the break, we were going down a list of questions for Creationists compiled by Frank Steiger in 1996. Question number 6 and 7 are related. What mathematical proof can you supply based on the known equations of thermodynamics that order cannot spontaneously arise from disorder? And, quote, if your claim that thermodynamics will not permit the evolution of complex living structures is true, then how do you explain, without resorting to make-believe special mechanisms that have no basis in thermodynamics, the development of a chick in an egg? Now, this is very technical and would take too long to cover in this show. However, I did already address this in a special show dedicated to thermodynamics last season. Furthermore, Steiger once again demonstrates a lack of basic understanding and has pulled a bait and switch. A chicken developing in an egg completely follows the laws of thermodynamics. There is no order arising from disorder. Why? Because the order is in the DNA of the chicken. It was already there because it got that from its parents. The chicken is simply consuming thermodynamic energy to build itself according to the plans contained in the DNA. The parent chickens got that information from their parents, who got it from their parents, and so on. So tell me, where did the first plans from the first chicken come from? The information contained within the DNA? You do not get plans for the space shuttle from an explosion happening in an airplane factory. Information only comes from information, and Steiger has missed the boat. The information had to have come from a source outside of nature, an omniscient source. Now, if we met an omniscient being, we would call him God. Thanks for coming out, Frank. Question number 8. If creationism is scientifically valid, then why is it necessary to emphasize that the sectarian religious dogma of the Book of Genesis is the ultimate scientific authority? Well, actually, we claim it's the ultimate history. There's a difference. When we're dealing with the science behind origins, we are dealing with the supernatural. The scientific and natural laws, like biogenesis and thermodynamics, show that life can only come from life. Now, this is a fact that can be observed and proven by even junior high school students. You do not get life from a rock. That is scientifically and naturally impossible. So to ask the question, where did the first life come from? You arrive at the same answer no matter whether you believe in evolution or creation. The first life had to have come about by supernatural means, outside of the laws of nature and science. See, I'm honest about the limits of science. Most anti-theists are not. So while we both must reach into the supernatural to answer that question of the first life, At least my model still follows the law of biogenesis. I still have life coming from life. It just so happens that the first life I refer to was outside of the laws of nature because he made the laws of nature. Question number 9. If you believe that God can override nature to create living things as described in the book of Genesis, then what reasons do you have, other than your religious beliefs, that God could not have created living things through a process of evolution? Well, of course he could have. The question isn't could he, but did he? And he very specifically states that he did not. The very verses Steiger is quoting about God overriding nature are the very verses that say exactly what God did. He said, and it was. And it all happened in 6 days. Question number 10 is a long one, and again, a whole pile of false blanket assertions disguised as a question. The standard creationist explanation for the distribution of fossils in geological strata, with most primitive life forms in the lower strata and mammals and humans in the upper strata, is that clever mankind was smart enough to climb to higher ground to escape the rising floodwaters. How do you explain the fact that thousands of persons drowned in the recent Central America floods in an area contiguous to higher ground? How do you explain the position of the fossils in the geologic layers with small fossils below large fossils, which is contrary to hydraulic sorting in which large objects settle deeper than small objects? Well, let's expose the false assertions first. Quote, with most primitive life forms in the lower strata and mammals and humans in the upper strata. End quote. Hogwash! There is no fossil sequence. In North America alone, there are hundreds of reverse sequences where the most primitive life is in rocks on top of more developed organisms. Now, I devoted an entire show in Season 1 to that subject, archived on YouTube. Just look up Fossil Sequence Busted. Furthermore, as we showed in that show and several others, just because a fossil is missing from a rock layer does not mean it wasn't there when the rocks were formed. Again, playing by the evolutionist rules, we have many organisms, like the coelacanth fish, which are around today, yet missing from the last alleged 70 million years of rock record. Now, obviously they were around when those rocks were formed. So absence of the fossil does not mean absence of the organism. Furthermore, Steiger apparently did not understand basic physics. Which floats better, a child or an adult? The correct answer is neither. They both float the same because they are the same density. Buoyancy, not size, determines where one winds up in a flood. Steiger's comments betray an ignorance of basic physics and do not reflect what we see in the fossil record at all. So the rest of Steiger's question is invalidated because he based his question on false assertions. He also left out the effects of floods in sorting organisms because dead mammals tend to bloat and float in a flood as compared to, say, dead fish and lizards. So with that out of the way, I have a series of questions with which I would like to challenge my honest skeptic friends, my honest evolutionary viewers. My questions for you, in celebration of International Question Evolution Day, I'm only going to ask 8, even though I could ask many more, but we're running out of time. Question number 1. Let's start at the beginning. How did the first life arise? If you have no life, then you have no evolution. Following the laws of science and nature, how did that first life arise? Question 2. How do you explain the origin of Grand Canyon without a worldwide flood? Number 3, how do you explain the copious numbers of dating methods which point to a young Earth and a young universe? 4, what scientifically factual information can you supply to support your contention that the universe is billions of years old? Don't give me your assumptions and theories, and don't give me the speed of light problem because that's also a problem for you, and I already answered it with my response. I want scientifically factual information. 5. How do you explain the origin of information, such as the information contained in the DNA, without violating the laws of thermodynamics? 6. How do you explain the preservation of the information in our DNA over millions and millions of years, seeing as how thermodynamics is observably and quickly removing bits and pieces of that information in every single generation. 7. How did sex arise? Seeing as how there are myriads of sexual reproduction systems in organisms, pretty much none of which are compatible with one another in reproduction. See River Rant number 13, Ian's sex video, for the quick lowdown on the problems you face in explaining this dilemma. Now, I'm not interested in sexual fantasies of how one system evolved into the other. I'm interested in factual scientific evidence, observed changes, like any good scientist would expect of a theory. 8. Do you think your brain was intelligently designed? And if not, then how can you trust your thoughts if they are the result of unintelligent, undirected forces, random chemistry? I would suggest to you that all of this points clearly to an omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent being. And I'm not talking about Zoltar the space alien. If we met someone who knew absolutely everything and had the power to make life from scratch, we would call them a god. You need to further ask yourself that if there is a God, what does he want from you? That God did create a body to live in as a human, and he called himself Jesus Christ. He proved that he was the author of life with the neatest magic trick done to date. He predicted his death and resurrection 3 days later, and then did exactly that, rising from the dead to show that he was the way, he was telling the truth, and he was the author of life. That creator said that in order to enter into eternal life, you must be born again. Now that is simply acknowledging that you have sinned, that you have done what you knew was wrong to do. You must ask to be forgiven of those sins and give him your life in return. He's still alive and listening to your every word and watching your every move. What's keeping you from giving him your life today? Okay, we're going to wrap this up. I'm your host, Ian Juby, saying ta-ta for now. I hope you'll join us again next Genesis week. Remember, you can send us in your comments, questions, hate mail, and low-carbohydrate recipes to us in a number of ways. Remember those words of warning and hope from our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. We'll see you next week.
We are a viewer-supported program and need your support to keep this program on the air. Please pray for us, and if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, K2K 2P4. While we cannot offer tax-deductible receipts outside of Canada, donors wishing to financially support the program can do so online at ianjuby.org/donations, and thank you for your support.